Okay, so I want to welcome everybody. Most of you know me. I'm Carol Lee. I'm the current chair of the Tree Advisory Group. And this is our regular tag meeting. As you heard, this meeting is going to be recorded. I'm going to give a very brief intro and then turn the meeting over to our landscape architect consultants from the firm Crowley Cottrell. So Naomi Cottrell is here, as well as Leah Broder. And I think Leah is going to do the presentation. And then we'll open the meeting for discussion. So actually, do we have a quorum? I'm not even sure. We don't have we have a quorum. So it's an official meeting. So most of you know the background. So TAG started noticing during the time of COVID that we were losing a lot of trees very rapidly, especially the horse chestnuts along Townhouse Road. So we applied for a CPA grant and got $40,000. Was approved at town meeting a year ago to cover a tree inventory and a design plan. No funds for trees or for planting. So we engaged Crowley Cottrell to help us, and now we have an interim concept design. So we're looking for community input. We have not reached the stage of looking at any individual trees or any tree species or when we're going to do the replacements. So let me preface the presentation by saying it's really hard to design by committee. So what we're looking for is to collect your input and then integrate your feedback with Crowley Cottrell's expertise. They have a lot of design sense and experience landscaping parks, civic and academic spaces. So not everyone's going to like all the ideas that are raised, but we want to collect them all and do the best we can. So the select board has the final say, I believe. Okay, so Nina is here and I'm going to admit her. Welcome, Nina. And so I'm going to ask you to wait with your comments until the end of the presentation. And if you would like to use the chat room to record any comments or questions, Naomi, if you feel like it's appropriate to interrupt, why don't you do that? But otherwise, I'm going to ask people to hold their comments until Leah is done with her presentation. Okay, are we all set? Leah?
Thank you, Carol, and thanks to all of you for taking the time on your Thursday evening to be with us. I think Carol gave a very thorough explanation of our project, and I will just say that it's the succession planting strategy. So what you will see are diagrams that are strategic in nature. I'll talk more about that as we go through the slides, but the important thing to keep in mind is specificity of individual trees is not what we're looking at. We're looking at big ideas and approaches for planting this space over time in a way that will be resilient and serve the needs of the town long term over the long range.
So in terms of I'm just going to
Yeah.
introduce myself. I'm Naomi Cottrell. And I just want to echo what Carol has said, in that a lot of what we want to do tonight is just to let you all know the narrative that we've been gathering through research and listening and observing. But part of tonight and the value of tonight will be hearing new voices. And if there's anything that, as far as the logic around which we are putting together this set of recommendations, if people think that there's flaws in it, if they have other things they want to add, that's really what tonight is for, is so that we feel all confident in that larger logic moving forward.
So just to give you a sense of the project timeline briefly, we've done a bunch of analysis, which we will review with you. Right now, we are in the concept design phase. After this meeting, we will meet again with TAG to present a refined concept design that reflects all the input that we have heard, and then get their approval. And then we go to present to the select board. So today we'll look at a review of the site analysis, which includes historical research and inventory of the site, and the tree inventory, which was done by Bartlett Tree Experts. And then we'll look at interim concept design, which we define in terms of character zones. We make observations and recommendations, and we will explain what we mean by that and when we get there.
Leah, are you still supposed to be on just the cover sheet?
No, oh. So
Because it's not moving forward.
resume. Okay, let's see. Shoot. Sorry. For some reason,
Okay, it just moved.
stop share. Let's share again. Okay, that
There.
was the timeline. Thank you, Naomi. This is our agenda for the day, for the evening. Short and sweet is our goal. Historical research. So the town was incorporated or settled in 1630 at that time it was called Watertown, but the bulk of the activity that we'll be looking at in terms of development of the town green occurred in the early 1900s or the teens. But we just want to mention in terms of historical research, and this is a brief synopsis of what we previously presented to TAG. We know that Weston itself was incorporated in 1713. And then we have the first town hall building, which is built on what is Boston Post Road. And then you see in these two images, the first parish Fieldstone Church, which is still standing today. Importantly, in 1892, the Village Improvement Association was begun, and that was an organization of residents who are concerned with making the town actually a beautiful place. So thinking about landscape planning and site planning for the town. So this is a drawing, a sketch of what the condition was in what is now the town green. So my cursor is circling around the area that is today the town green. We were just looking at photos of this town hall, and there's the first parish church. We know that it was swampy land with a seasonal creek, and that it was surrounded by woodlands. So trees really all around, except for this swampy area at the center. In 1911, the town improvement organization hired Shercliffe to design the town green. So in 1912, he proposed this plan. It's referred to, so forgive me, I know that today it's called the town green, but a lot of the documentation refers to town common. So if I get confused and call it the town common, please forgive me. The town common plan in 1912 proposed an upper road with town hall placed in the center, utilizing that open meadow space as a town common. And then he did propose some development sites along the northern edge of the site. And then at the south, there were roads, the church, and library. Important elements of that plan, as we look at it today as landscape architects, we see these prominent views that were prioritized, setting the town hall at a high elevation, keeping open views into what is now the green, and then also views from the library across the common or green to the town hall. There are also some long views at the east and west corners of the site. This diagram refers in purple to site circulation. What was interesting to us is to see that this original plan showed a secondary internal path inside the town green. There's the perimeter walkway or sidewalk that we have today. And it also showed sidewalks on the north side of what is now Townhouse Road. Also important is that there was a prominent gathering space designed to be to cross the road and extend with a promontory and retaining wall into the common. But Shercliffe actually responded to site conditions that he found. So he did that preliminary plan, which is conceptual, and then in 1917 he gets down on the ground and starts designing the actual road, and in so doing realizes that the undulating topography of the existing wetland is something he's going to work with and not against. And he also recognizes the importance of holding up the perimeter road, keeping it at a higher elevation, and using the existing wall that is at the base of the shed, the existing shed. So that becomes an important element of the plan, which is there today, and we refer to as the overlook. These are some photos from the early 1910s. These are actually Shercliffe's photos. And what is interesting is you're looking down the length of the green. In this view, you're looking east to west. On the left side of the image, you see the shed being retained with this stone wall, which is also here from a different view seen on the right. And that's the wall that we later referred to as the overlook wall. It's clear already from this image on the right, standing opposite that shed, that there is woodland planting, the existing conditions. And then you see that very clearly in these bottom images. So the whole northern site, northern portion of the site was wooded. And these are views that were taken after the road was graded and built, and the new town hall was built. So town hall relocated. What we find interesting here is to look at the planting, and what we see is I'll start in the bottom right image. Those clear views of the town hall are being maintained, but we see what's framing those views is a large kind of scraggly composition of planting, which we are pretty confident is remnant woodland that was just kept because of the value of keeping a tall canopy to frame the views and to give some scale to this monumental building. We'll talk more about that in terms of our proposal later on, but so you're seeing in this left-hand image, these are the remnant trees, and you see it on the right, so looking towards the town hall. We also think it's interesting that the meadow, that swampy meadow, which was filled and leveled somewhat, there was actually apple tree kept in the meadow, so the idea that it wasn't just devoid of all trees, but that there was at least one kind of specimen tree in the center. This is an image not drawn by Shercliffe, but that shows the street tree planting that was done in the early 1920s. The horse chestnut planting, what we learned is that it was done while Shercliffe was involved still with the town. And you can see that there's a kind of a regularized planting of street trees, meaning regularly spaced along Town Hall Road and then along Central to the south and Church to the southeast. And then moving into the 21st century, we know that in 2018, there was a town center open space plan done by a group, including a landscape architect, Richard Burke, as well as niche civil engineers and util architecture. And in part of their plan was consideration of the importance of street tree planting throughout the town center, which we think is important. And they also had design ideas about what is called Knox Park in the Southwest and what we refer to now as the Half Moon, which is that at the intersection with church and school. These are a bit difficult to read, I understand, but these are the construction drawings of what was intended to be built when the project went to construction in, I think, 2021. And what is interesting, if you can see it, is that there were street trees planned along along the road south of what we call the Half Moon, but those trees were not planted. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We understand that there were big concerns raised about views of the church, and that those street trees would infringe upon those views. These street trees also were not planted. And there was also concern about views from the town center all the way to the town hall, I believe. So we also did a site inventory, looking at existing conditions. So this is an aerial view of the site.
Do you want me to do this, Leah?
Sure, yeah.
So, the reason for us to do a site inventory is just to really document the things that are working and the opportunities and the constraints that exist right now. Some things are still remaining from the original intent of Surecliff and some are not. And so it's really important for us to just make that existing conditions report in a way. So these are views that are into the site, and we think that it's really important to acknowledge the fact that there are places that you have these long views, primarily from Town Hall across the road to the library and vice versa. We also acknowledge that there are partial views, but really that only exists on part of the perimeter. And that's something that we get into and acknowledge that that probably wasn't the original intent. So we just want to we'll make an analysis of that further. Go ahead. So the circulation is something that does actually vary pretty wildly from the original concept drawing of Surecliff, but there's never been that we could find in any historical reference a interior or a lower path. And so really any pedestrian movement that is on pavement is really relegated to the sidewalk on the perimeter roads. We do understand that that this pedestrian access through the middle from Town Hall over to Boston Post Road has been in the works from the very beginning. It is not accessible for universal use, and so we call that out here. And then also just showing that we understand that the use of the site includes pedestrian access from the two thin corners from east and west, and certainly that there's vehicular circulation coming in from the east. Go ahead. We have seen the photographs and understand diagrammatically how the town common or town green is used in a more formal way and in a more informal way. But the formal ways being things like graduation, which is really important to the history of the town. Informal uses such as sledding down the hill in the area that, again, we refer to as the Half Moon. And that there is really this feature of the mixed vegetation that has grown out of years of what initially was the remnant woodland and has been added to over time to really be a collection of multi-story plants.
I believe Naomi might have been cut off, so I'll pick up while she reconnects. We also look at topography and understand that the basic drainage pattern remains, that there is a low wet area down the center of the project, and that the high areas are at the perimeter. Lamson Park to the northwest also slopes pretty dramatically from the high point at the playground down slope. We also know that the topography undulates.
Taking over.
Oh, I just picked up. So
Hi, yeah, go ahead.
onto topography. Just the undulating topography, that this is not what is a traditional town common, which would be a more flat grazing area or parade ground. Naomi?
The slope diagram is particularly important that we do want to have folks understand a bit, the lightest colors being the flattest areas. So there is a flat bottom to the town green. And it does lend itself to things like gatherings for graduation. Particularly, it's difficult to have that circulation, that secondary circulation path in here, because it would be going up and down hills. So we understand, once it was decided that the topography would remain, that that secondary path was abandoned as an idea. The darkest pink slopes are very steep, and I think intuitively everybody who knows town knows that this is a bowl of some kind, that really that these steep slide slopes have a unique character, but they're more challenging as far as vegetation and circulation and other things. Go ahead. We know that there's ledge, and this is part of what we will deal with, and part of the reason why our recommendations are more broad brush, because we're not picking exact spots. We know that if a tree were to be determined to be planted in these areas, you might have to move it 10 feet to one side or the other because of ledge. And then lastly, in our look at the existing conditions, we do understand that there is infrastructure, both drainage as well as other utilities that run through and along the perimeter of the site. And again, this is in with our thinking, but would be more something that would be referred to when actual planting were to happen. Go ahead.
So then we will quickly move into the tree inventory and analysis. These are drawings that we have done based on Bartlett's work on site. So they made a thorough inventory of all the existing trees, which it's very clear that the trees are grouped primarily along the perimeter of the site. We also looked at Knox and Lamson, and you can see the clusters, the way the trees are clustered. We know that there is a broad variety of species, which is always good in terms of both habitat, but also resilience to pest or disease. So that's interesting to look at. We wanted to break that down a little more to understand if there was a clear strategy to the distribution of species on site. And what we see clearly up on the left is that the trees planted immediately adjacent to the road in what we call the verge, which is between the sidewalk and the road, are single species trees. So we know it's the lindens on the south and the horse chestnuts on the north, but it's also clear that the consistency of those plantings has eroded over time, as Carol referred to at the beginning of the presentation. There is a kind of a range of kinds of deciduous canopy trees that are planted on those slopes. There is a preponderance of maple and oak, but there also are a number of other deciduous species interspersed. And the evergreens, there are prominent ones right in front of Town Hall and also a big group of hemlocks in Lamson Park. And then there are other species, evergreen species kind of distributed throughout. We did note that there are quite a few at the low side of the overlook wall, which if you want something to function as an overlook is a challenge as the canopy does block views. In terms of understory or flowering trees, they're primarily distributed along the north side, but there are clusters kind of all over the common as well. And then the analytical piece of this is what Bartlett tree experts refer to as suitability for preservation. So they make an evaluation and analysis of what they find with the trees on site, and the suitability they put into 3 categories: high suitability for preservation, moderate, and low. And these are based on a combination of tree health, structural integrity, species response, and that's response to change, construction, and the stressors of the existing conditions and uses, and then tree age and the species longevity. So in green, you're looking at the high suitability for preservation. So those are the trees we think will be around for a long time. The yellow are the moderate trees. So they'll be around for a shorter period of time. And the low suitability are trees that Bartlett actually either is suggesting to remove or they're already dead. So when we move into our design phase, we're designing with this in mind, and in our minds, we kind of eliminate all those trees that we know are either dead or dying or should be removed because of challenges with the categories that we just showed. And so we're using the basis of design is our evaluation of how to build on and edit the trees that you see here, these high suitability and moderate suitability trees. So moving into our interim concept design, Naomi is going to talk about our analysis of character zones and what we mean when we refer to that.
Great, thank you. We use this term in our office, and it's really a way to talk about things that are both physical and that you can see, but also sort of the intangible way in which landscapes hold together or don't hold together. So a lot of times we will look at a space and a character is based on the type of planting or the slope or both added together. And really what we try to do here is we look at character, we look at what the best and the highest functioning character and the character that makes the characters that make the most sense, and we think, which ones of these do we want to amplify, and which ones do we want to edit or decrease the value of. So you'll see that as we go into proposals, there are places that we actually think are really high value, and you'll see those characters expanded. And then other places that we feel like, as I said, need to be edited. So we have a series of colors, and that's how we show sort of the zones of character, with the yellow being where you have a street tree character, and that is on part of Townhouse Road because one half of it has already become over mature or have been damaged and have died. And then you have a very clean and successful line down on Boston Post Road. They are single species, different on each road, but that is a consistent line, and that's the character. This is a character that we do want to amplify. We think it is very important and very applicable for the site. The second character I'm actually going to jump down on the list is to talk about the purple, which we call out as being the multi-level planting. And in the history, we understand why this is here. It was predominantly on the north side, a remnant woodland that over time, as those mature trees died, that other things were planted, and it really became a collection of a variety of things at different heights, and some flowering and including shrubs. The multi-level planting actually that's associated with the overlook was something that also was from very early days of Shercliffe's work, and that he talked about having planting at the base of the wall. And much of this today is incredibly overgrown, and we'll look at that. And so really we're looking at being very careful about where this multi-level planting will be, because this is one of the predominant reasons why there are view corridors that are quite interrupted into the town common. The area that we are showing in red that we're calling a mixed canopy slope is a character actually that we think is incredibly important and does a really great job of having a planting that holds the edge of the green, as well as gives a lot of value for shade and diversity. We are also going to amplify this character, and really the best example of this character is the cluster and the drifts of trees that are along Boston Post Road. We have we're showing that in the dark green, these areas of overgrown or dying evergreens. We want to make sure we address those, because those are a lot of the trees that are in red or red-yellow. And we want to have a plan in place for making sure that the whole area that is dead, dying, or overgrown evergreen doesn't all go at once and leave a big vacancy of canopy and tree within these areas. And then lastly, there's a very large swath of wide open lawn. And we would say that this is something that is great, it's usable, but we also think that there's opportunity to do something different here and really special. And so we will be amplifying this to really look back to that one photograph that Leah showed with the specimen tree in it from the historical photos, and really challenging folks to maybe think about how we could strategically have specimens that are through the lawn area. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see what our proposal is. So we are showing the street trees being something that is not only being consistent along the whole edge of Townhouse Road, but potentially jumping across and engaging the other side of the street. In Shercliffe's work, it was really clear that he anticipated or wanted for Townhouse Road to be through a character of trees, and that it wasn't one-sided. We are suggesting this double-sided alley of a really strong, bold move that's quite civic in character. We are also then proposing extending the idea of a tree-lined street through Knox Park to really hold that edge and create a more interior feel on that parcel. I want to talk a little bit about the multi-level planting. So again, skipping to the purple, we actually think that this area with the multi-level planting should be shrunk and be a little bit more symmetrical just right around Town Hall. We see the value of being able to see into the town green as being really important. So we would like to, on the area that is to the west of where the multi-level planting is, so a little bit further west, there we go, right in here, that this area where we're showing it then being red, to start to eliminate the understory, start to take away and edit out so that we have more cleared views. So the idea behind the red, this mixed canopy slope, is to add in a mixed canopy. So unlike the street trees, which would be single species on Townhouse Road and continuing the single species along Boston Post Road, this red area, the next level in on the slope, would be a collection of mixed canopy, but all things that you can see underneath, so that you really have lots of sight lines into the space. Lastly, I want to talk about the framed views. We understand that in the very beginning of Shercliffe's work, that he had a clear intention about there being framed views in and through to Town Hall and to the library. The way in which we want to amplify that idea is by beefing up the planting on either side of the opening, so that really you frame the view. The view isn't completely wide open. It now has these bookends so that you are really given a very clear and framed and curated connection to Town Hall. The multi-level planting that we're showing at the base of the overlook would be, again, taken down and lowered, still in the same character that Shercliffe had intended, but that it is something that we start to edit out the taller species and make lower. And we'll show you all of this as we go forward. But that's the larger character zones. Again, shrinking some, like the purple area, and amplifying others to really make a very consistent and lots of intent on the different zones throughout. So Leah, you're muted.
So we are choosing to show you these diagrams with all of the trees color coded to follow these character types, to kind of reinforce the idea that this is really zoning, and we're setting up kind of a structure for the space. So just to reiterate, we're talking about, and we'll go through each of them, but we'll go through what we mean by street trees, what we mean by the mixed canopy slope, what we mean by the multi-level planting, which is just beneath Town Hall and beneath the overlook, how we frame the views with trees, and what our intention is with planting specimens in the more open green areas. So looking first at street trees, the existing character on Boston Post Road with the lindens, which is a very clear street tree planting. This, as Naomi mentioned, we are interested in amplifying this, and we know that Shercliffe valued this and was looking at similar planting elsewhere and thinking about implementing it here in Weston. This is a sectional cut through the road. This is actually a townhouse road. I think looking at the street trees, which are planted right now, not totally regularly spaced, so they kind of stagger. And then there's kind of a dense planting beneath them on the slope. Our proposal is to, over time, plant a more regularized single species of street trees using both sides of the street. And we feel that this is a really strong move and gives the town the opportunity to have some flexibility when there are street trees planted on both sides with regular spacing. When you encounter infrastructure, utilities, or ledge and can't plant in certain places, because there will be many other trees planted on one or the other side, the larger move and the sensibility of driving through a canopy of trees or walking through a canopy of trees will still be there. In contrast, the mixed canopy slopes, we are intending to be distinct from the street trees, amplifying the irregular spacing of these trees and being mindful about actually mixing the species and using both deciduous and some evergreen trees. We have heard in feedback that so far that there is interest in having some evergreen along particularly the northern edge, so that in winter the edge of the open green is really legible. So we're interested in that. And then we showed these kind of clusters of a mixed species palette This is the existing cluster at Lamson Park that we think is working beautifully, and we're looking to just pretty much recreate that sensibility on the slopes. So whereas today there's in this area there's all evergreens, so we're interested in integrating a mix of deciduous and evergreen, bringing that all the way up to the playground. This is the character of the kind of mixed deciduous slope. In fact, I think many of these are lindens along Boston Post Road, but this irregular spacing that is so distinct from the regularity that's on the road is what we're interested in. And the fact that the trees really hold to the slope so that the flatter portion of the site is something very different. The multi-level planting that Naomi referred to before, we want to amplify that. We think it's a beautiful piece of the town common, and particularly knowing that it's used really 12 months of the year. It's very nice to have seasonality in the canopy, both among the trees, but even some shrub and understory planting. These are views today in different seasons. So a spring view looking at the town hall and a winter view. You can see some people in the foreground who are there sledding. But we talked to you about the value we think there is in opening up these views. And we know from the documentation we have from Surecliff that in fact, the whole colonnade was intended to be clear of trees. Ooh. Oh, sadly, we had a view of that that I think I've somehow missed. But if you can imagine that that's our intent. So looking at this sectionally, this is the same area of the multi-level trees. And what we know is that they now kind of bleed into the flat portion of the site. This is the existing condition. In our proposal, we're looking at editing out some of that, making the zone more distinct, that it really occurs on the slope, and that the street trees right in front of town common or town hall would not be replanted, the ones that are immediately in front of the colonnade. Here we go. So this is the proposed view with cleared views. So if you recall, the existing condition really does have planting that is in this area, and we're interested in holding it further away from the path, further away from the colonnade. The framed views that we talked about, so we were referring to this area as the half moon, and adding trees at the perimeter to make those bookends, and then adding some understory trees at the perimeter and clearing the center at the overlook. So this is the half moon area today. You can see the town hall here and the church to the right. So in turquoise, an idea about creating thicker groves at the two edges, but maintaining the center clear. We have a second idea, which is our reaction to the openness of this space and our experience with urban heat island effect, and knowing that because of all the asphalt and paving in this area, that this sidewalk that is fully exposed and wraps around this half moon area will be very hot, or is very hot in the summer. We also were interested in looking at an option where we would propose street trees in that zone, so that there could be shade cast on that sidewalk. We think this area is really ripe for occupation, potentially furnishing. It has as we know, the nice views into the green, and it's a really civic space, but right now it feels quite underutilized because of its just uninflected openness.
Well, I
Looking
think,
at
Leah, can you just go back for a minute? I
Yeah.
just want folks to understand where this view is from. So you're
Yeah.
not seeing that clear view to the town hall because where
Or
this
oblique.
view, exactly. So what you're seeing is you're seeing the sides of these trees, but if we were to move to the library, there would be this opening. Yes, there would be in this version of it, there would be yellow trees that you would be seeing underneath. But the idea being that the cluster of trees, the grove or the bookends, as we've been calling it, are not obstructing that clear, say, 70 feet that would be open in front of the library directly across from the town hall.
The overlook, so we are we find the actual physical structure of the wall to be quite interesting and important, we think, in the history of the site. Today, it is completely obscured because of the evergreen vegetation and the overgrown shrubs that are at the low side of this wall. You can see from standing on the wall that the shrubs begin to obscure the view. And so we're interested in opening up those views, both from inside the green, looking at the wall, and also from on top of the wall, looking out toward the town hall. So this is today, if you were to stand on that sidewalk, your views are obscured. There's a small tree in the kind of grassy area at the high side of the wall, and then lots of mixed planting beneath the wall. We know historically there was a large elm tree here, and we think that's a really beautiful thing to bring back. The idea of a single specimen tree that can grow very large over time and really make almost a kind of a room at the top of this wall to start to draw people down so that they can occupy it and look out to the town hall, clearing that understory and brush, clearing some of the evergreens so that those views remain clear. Talking about specimens in the open green. So we think it is a nice move to draw people into the green, to have some specimen trees that are intended to be viewed in the round that can get very large or have particularly sculptural form and seasonal interest. And we think the same idea can be used in Lamson Park as a way to encourage occupation of the open lawn area, which we believe is kind of underutilized. Of course, being mindful to keep clear areas for events. We know how important that is for the town. So this is, the views today. There really is not a single tree in the bulk of the center of the green. This is a sectional view. And then this is the kind of experience we're imagining where there's a large canopy tree growing on the open lawn so that there's really a place to be, to have a picnic in the shade, or to occupy the center. So back to our summary diagram showing the variety of character zones that we are interested in proposing, and we're eager to hear people's reactions, thoughts, and questions. And I'm happy to flip back. So I think we're using the system of raising hands if you have a question, and then we'll be unmuted by the moderator. And I'm happy to turn to any slide or section that you have questions or want to discuss.
Actually, I think you may be able to unmute yourself. Leslie, try.
Dangerous, but I can unmute myself. I'm sure people would be
Okay.
happy if I couldn't. I'll start. No one else seemed to want to jump into the fray. Obviously, you've done an excellent job bringing all this information together and categorizing it so we can see it from different points of view and for different ways of thinking, etc. Excellent, excellent job. I've lived in Weston all my life, so I have lots of memories about the town green. And part of them I'll share with you, and a part of them things you're proposing I have to gives me pause, but we can go from there. One of the things I love is the re-ringing the green with the major canopy trees. I think that's has to be done. One of the things that is wonderful when you pass through that first colonnade of canopy trees is you really do feel like you're going through an architectural colonnade, from, inside to outside or from outside to inside. It's a real passage of importance. I think one of the things you should realize is folks do not follow a straight line, as you know, anywhere. So a lot of folks are coming from the west end of the common, now you got me doing it, of the green, from where, the Brothers is and the ice cream stand and everything else. And they're really funneling down that end of it. So I think you really need to understand that's a real passage across. It's tempting to go with the formality of the town hall, and there are some civic buildings, and we'd hope to have the tavern up and functioning. But a lot of the parking, et cetera, is from that end. And I think some of your moves need to sort of take that into consideration. I am a bit concerned about the mixed canopy on the Boston Post roadside, below the, I'm going to call it the colonnade of trees. You don't want so many that you feel like you've gone through this great colonnade and now you're bumping your nose on other trees. So you've got to make sure there's a free flow through there. To have a secondary screen, I can understand, but I think it has to be done very carefully. One of the functions you didn't mention is town concerts. Often the band sits down in the middle and people sit on the slopes like an amphitheater and basically attend that way. The kids and the dogs are on the flat part running around, and the oldster is set up with folding lawn chairs on the upper edge. So maybe whether there makes sense to try and put some hardscape, amphitheater, sitting in one place or the other, just a sitting wall in those areas, it could be a possibility. The other thing which I am concerned about is you may or may not have noticed that lovely head house for the septic system to the left as you go up the town hall. I don't know how, where, or why that was handled that way. I understand the engineering constraints, but it's a crying shame. I'm hoping, and I would ask that you, and I don't know who anybody else has any interest in this, that we somehow devise some kind of a hardscape to go over it, whether it's a bandstand, whether it's some kind of, stepping seat wall going up informally on the side, because it is, in my mind, atrocious that when you look to the graduation, you look up there, you see it. Painting it green would probably help, but that's one comment. Two more, and then I'll let somebody else speak. I do get nervous taking down too much of the multi-planting. I think it would be lovely if you could wend a path through there that actually is parallel to Townhouse Road. Maybe that becomes your secondary path and it's more informal as you sort of wander. The other one is a connection to the Lamson Playground. I think it would be great if you made a connection there. Again, not so formal, but a wander. You wander from one side of the road to the other side and then down. So those are my thoughts. I am hesitant about planting too many specimen trees in the center. I would probably be leaning towards taking away the two that are the most center. But that's just one viewpoint. Let's see what everybody else has to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. I do want to just address that some of the things that you have made comments on, which I think are all really valid, are talking about hardscape and and circulation improvements. And this plan is really only looking at vegetation. We were hired to just come up with a strategy for planting, maintenance, and revegetation over time. And I don't disagree with you on many of your points. We have not drawn them on our plan because that's not really in our purview for this study. I think that that we have some of these things in mind, but it's not anything that we aren't, that's just not what we were hired to do at this point.
Right.
So those ideas can be folded into this.
Yeah, it would be helpful, note just as a, notes on the side for the next phrase or infrastructure, these are things discussed, and you obviously, whether you or somebody else comes in to do it, not to lose the idea or the concern or et cetera, strategy. Thank you.
Let me say a couple of things. So there is a sidewalk master plan underway. I don't know if accessibility on the town green is part of that. But as Leah and Naomi pointed out, the ADA accessibility doesn't exist right now. And during graduation, people who need access and are unable to provide it themselves are driven down in golf carts. So Leslie, you talked about accessibility from the Knox Park and that people walk in there because it's flat there and it's close to parking. Yeah, down there. So it would be nice if there were wheelchair access, at least so you could go in, sit in the middle of the park. But I'm not sure where that stands as far as the sidewalk master plan goes. When Shercliffe designed the green in 20-ish, they specifically said no bandstands, no amphitheater, that it was not supposed to be a park. So I think people have maintained that character. So that's why we have no hardscape, no accoutrements, no structures. But I agree.
Except for the septic head house.
Right, except for that.
Yeah, right, guys.
So, which is shielded with Ilex glabra with inkberry pretty well, it's evergreen. So it's not, could be worse.
Wow.
Could be worse.
Could be better.
Yeah. So there are a lot of things that Naomi and Leah brought up that I know people, it's new, it's different. Opening up the colonnade, I know that one big evergreen was taken down in front of the town hall a couple of years ago, just to open up that view. And I think it shows up in that picture you showed of the town hall, but it's no longer there. It was maybe taken down in 2017-ish. I'm not sure. That's before my time. But that was an old picture. And then the area in the Half Moon area and blocking the view of the First Parish. So when Skip Burke's proposal was accepted by the select board, but then there was a big hue and cry that it was going to obscure the plantings that Skip proposed were going to obscure some of the views, and at the last minute they were removed. And so Crowley Cottrell is proposing that we reconsider that, because from a design standpoint, that is to counteract the heat island effect, which is only accelerating, that's an important consideration.
I think I'll add to what Carol's saying there. I know that was one of the few places that we said you could do this or you could do that. I think when we wrap up this study and recommendations, we know that there will be places that won't have 100% consensus from folks on how things move forward. And I did a study like this for the city of Salem a few years ago, and there were certainly portions of the master plan or the tree planting plan that we did for the Salem Common that there wasn't complete consensus on. It's still, the plan that we had represented a a really well vetted approach to coming up with, again, a logic for how trees are managed in the next several years. And what we found was that the places that had less consensus are the places that they just haven't made a decision on yet. So I would say that if the document is a well working document, it has both current logic, and then it also gives a path for how this can be developed over time. And it will have a certain level of our recommendations that really come from what we see in best practices within urban space and suburban space planning. And if there's plenty of work to do here, and there's plenty of canopy that will need to be planted and replanted in the next decades. And so if that's an area that remains to be contentious, we understand that, but we would love to hear more about that.
Anybody else? Oh, let's see. So we do have a public tree management program, which the town implemented a few years ago. And so we have no funding to plant any of these trees. So, however, in response to the public tree management program, there was additional funding put into the DPW project budget. So I'm hoping that there will be some funding, there will be some monies to do some of this plantings. And we'll just have to work this out with the select board. Anybody else? Don't all jump on board. Leslie,
I'll jump in. Oh,
Nina.
yes, I just had a couple questions. Up at the playground, you have proposed mixed canopy. And there's already quite a lot of planting around the playground that was part of the construction design of the playground. Is that some of that going to be removed and replaced in your view? Should it be messed with, or? So I think there's spruces and things like that up at the playground.
We're not proposing removing any of the trees that were planted as part of that project.
Okay. Okay.
I believe
Yeah, I didn't think so, but
at least one already did not survive. We are in this proposal looking at planting some understory flowering trees at the entrance, just to kind of set off the entrance, which is a bit remote. So to try and bring some color up to the top of that slope, but we are not proposing removing anything that was associated with that project, with that recent playground renovation.
mm-hmm.
So mixed canopy doesn't mean deciduous, it just means mixed.
It means it would also include evergreens. And you know, one thing that we didn't walk you all through is the way in which the trees are drawn on here. And so, Leah, I don't know if you can zoom in easily, but we do draw as a drawing convention, we do draw an evergreen with a jagged edged outline. And then deciduous trees are a smooth outline. But we're not only saying that it's mixed species in this edge zone, in the slope zone, but that it's also mixed deciduous and evergreen. We think that Lamson is actually has some really nice moments, as Leah was saying. There is this drift of predominantly oaks, but also there's some evergreens within it that is actually really lovely. They're some of the nicest trees, in my opinion, in and around this area as a cluster and a group. So that's really where we want to amplify that character. So when the hemlocks need to come down, when that slope needs to be replanted, we'd like to establish some of new drifts that are similar to that, But then in the area that is the flattest part of the area up and around Knox Park, we are having some standalone specimen trees out in that lawn to really encourage people to kind of spill out from the playground area and use that flat lawn that with a little bit points of shade on it. As a way to make it more comfortable to spend real time there. And so we're treating in a way that flat area as the same idea as sort of the flat area within the town green itself, with specimen trees kind of dotted through it.
It sounds good. I just to finish my thought on that. So below the playground, coming towards the Townhouse Road, that cluster that you just talked about, Naomi, I totally agree. I think there's huge potential, but they all are oaks of the same age, and they're carefully mowed up to the trunks. And I think if I can, hope for the future, that we start thinking of this as a grove that deserves to be planted with some young trees to come along, because we're going to see some really bad storms, they say. And so a multi-age stand of oaks and say shagbark hickory or something would be wonderful, I think, in that area.
Yeah, and we actually aren't showing a lot of new trees in that zone. So I'll say the other thing that we do for the convention of this drawing is that any tree with a solid circle for its trunk is an existing tree, and the ones with a plus would be trees that are added.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for telling us that.
that
Yeah.
stand right now is great, we have not done that, but the other stands are made
Yes.
up of both existing and proposed. And so I see your point. And as those start to decline, or maybe even preemptively, we could add some other smaller next generation to that. But we are definitely doing that in the other drifts that are on that slope.
Yeah, and there are, there's bedrock under there in quite a few places, so it's not going to be that easy. But I just wanted to put that thought out to start with some young small trees, not, just to 3, 4 foot, 5 foot, whatever. But also, I just wanted to thank you. It was just such a wonderful presentation by the two of you, and really, it's exciting. It's bold, and I just don't want to let go. Like Leslie, I grew up in town and had such fun with all my life with the town hall and in winter. I just don't. I love the woodland aspect of the mixed use that's in purple, and I don't like the idea of reducing it. I think it should be amplified, not reduced. That's my feeling. And there's way too few evergreens in my view. It's only one white pine in there, I think, and one or two hemlocks. But I love that understory. Rhododendrons and azaleas. Used to be a lot of azaleas. I don't know what happened to them all, but this time of year was just glorious in that area of your purple circles. So I'm hoping that can still be amplified and not let go.
Well, I think just to talk about some of the points that you bring up. Again, this is something that we're seeing as being a living document that, it's not like tomorrow we go in and we decrease the amount of the purple character, right? But as a as horticultural maintenance, that area is the hardest area to maintain. And we want to make sure that a planting like that is something that is healthy and viable and well maintained. And so we do think that reducing it some, again, on the western side, is going to help with that. It makes the maintenance and the cost to keep this place great down. The other reason why we thought it was important to take away some of the understory, right where the cursor is, and to the west a little bit, is that we actually think again that Knox Park Lamson Park and its connection to the green can be more amplified. And so by taking away some of the blocking views, it starts to make those two areas feel more connected. You can see from one into the other more. And this is a real subtle thing. But that's some of the big ideas around that, is to have a little bit more porosity and to really make the areas that have that multi-level and mixed level species, the purple area, be really spectacular because it's not stretched too far, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Barbara?
Yes, I think it's a great plan. Thank you for working so hard on it. So there are some things that I don't understand completely. So over on the left side, to the left of Lamson Park, where the hemlocks, there's some now that have the woolly adelgid and will eventually have to be taken down. So I wasn't clear what it was that you were proposing to put there in their place, if you were going to propose more hemlocks right there, or start to integrate some other types of trees in that area.
Leah, can you navigate to, Barbara, this is a great question. Can you
Oh,
navigate to?
hold on a minute.
Uh,
Oh, sorry, I had my headphones on, so I couldn't hear you.
I was just saying I wanted to get Leah to navigate to the tree health and suitability for preservation. So the trees that are shown in yellow are predominantly the hemlock. Bartlett has not called them, they're not red trees yet. And we know that there's no cure for the woolly adelgid. There's only treatment that you have to continue through the life of the tree. And what we can imagine here is that you may reduce the number if some are sicker than others, and you may then take and make a commitment to treating a few of them that remain. This is something that I think for any of this plan, there are really clear recommendations for don't treat or do anything to any of the red trees. Like they're pretty much goners, and don't spend any of the town resources on keeping them. Now, yellow is a different story. I think when you find the best ones of a group, and we can imagine that there might be one or two of that group that is really a great hemlock that you may want to preserve. So our scheme can actually work with that. That if there say are one or two, if the town deems it is important to treat them, to save them, then that works into the multi species grove or drifts that we're showing in our plan. So again, we think that the clusters of the oaks and the evergreens mixed together up here is really the way to go. What we would not do, Barbara, is to have a big grouping of just hemlocks. We can imagine picking out a few of them and then really having it be mixed with some beautiful hardwoods.
Okay. So I had some other questions also. So going back to the other image that you had showing the street trees, if you could go back to that, the previous image. Yes, that one. So it just seemed to me that there are an awful lot of the yellow street trees that you proposed to put in along the roadway, the townhouse road going up past the town hall. And it seems like it will feel awfully crowded. And I know maybe some people like to have it as an alley, sort of closed off, but to me, it seemed like a little bit too much in terms of tree number. And so I don't know what other people may think about that. The other thing is that down where the blue um, trees are making the framed view, there was the red maple that died and had to be removed. I think maybe that was on the left side of the blue group, to the left of the half moon area. Maybe that red maple was there. Um, and then, yeah, there are the two little trees just to the right of that. It seemed to me that maybe there are too many trees in the blue group. I'd like to see the red maple replaced and maybe a couple more that are to the right of where that red maple was, but I sort of prefer having that half moon area be a little bit more closed or more open than is shown on your drawing, and maybe on the other side too. I don't have a memory of what's there on the right side of the half moon. My other thought was too that on the purple multi-level planting space in front of the town hall, I'd like to not see that thinned out too much. And I was just wondering about, I can't remember what's growing over there at the moment, the lowest type of plantings, but I just wondered whether we could keep it low maintenance by putting more native ground cover plants in there with, a good number of mid-size shrubs. And I like the idea that Nina had of adding back some of the azaleas that seem to be disappearing. So those are my thoughts about what
Leah, I don't know if you want to address some of these or I can. Maybe I'll just say, and then I'll say something about the street trees, and if you want to say things about that sort of purple tone that we have on the drawing. But the street trees that we're showing are actually being shown at 30 feet apart, which is actually quite typical for street tree planting. There are some municipalities that like them a little bit closer. Some municipalities like them at 20 or 25 feet apart when you're trying to really make an alley. So
Okay. It just looks to my eye,
it's a
just looking
pretty
at the
big space.
picture, there are an awful lot of them.
And so I think, and really, if you look along Boston Post Road, again, we're showing on this plan, new and existing together. And really the spacing that we're showing, is not, I'm gonna, I can't mark up here, but, you see right above the word Boston on Boston Post Road, those are existing trees and the existing lindens and their spacing. And actually we're following the same spacing.
Okay.
And so if you know how that feels, that's the distance between them. And
Okay.
keeping that as being something. But I think too, it looks like a lot of trees. This is a diagram, and we know that there may only be, say, 70% of these trees that might be able to go in because, again, utility or some kind of ledge. But if we get a majority of them, they will still read. So while we're showing it in all of the locations, we know that that's probably not going to happen. We also know that it's probably not going to all happen at once. So while it is a big, bold idea, the implementation of it is going to be less rigid than how it is depicted here.
Okay.
Leslie, do you have one?
Yeah, I have a couple. I want to follow up on what Barbara was just saying. If those trees are spaced 30 feet apart, you're showing them with a canopy of about 10 feet. So I think some of your canopies might not be true to form. And I think that's what's giving the strange read.
Yeah, so this is a tricky thing when you do a plan like this, because we're not showing everything as mature all at once. Because truly this plan won't ever be everything mature all at once, because it will be a successional plan. And would be
You're right,
implemented,
but I think
over
that's
decades.
what's making it hard to read. The other thing is I want to reiterate what Nina said and what Barbara said. We are hesitant losing so much of the multi-level planting that's in there. I understand you're saying it's a horticultural maintenance nightmare, but I think there are ways to improve it. I do remember as Nina did, how gorgeous it was when that whole slope was in flower. And I think we can go back and make that happen. One of the things I would hate to see is have this town green be over formalized. It was never a parade ground. It was, always a sort of bowl, the ex-swamp. It's delightfully informal. So some of the informality, I think, should be kept, and not eradicated. And I think, that slope is one of them. Did anybody discuss, and I don't really have a dog in the fight, but the first parish views, did that come up? I had to step away from the meeting for a minute. Did that come up at all?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
We know that Pam Fox especially was very concerned that the first parish be visible from all sides, which is why some of the trees in the area that we are calling the Half Moon and the Watering Trough, they were in Skip Burke's original plan. They were approved by the select board, but at the last minute, when they were ready to plant, they were taken out.
Right, so somehow I think that's a big conversation to be had. Like, as I say, I don't have, but I think that they need to come and have a discussion, the next time around or earlier before this goes too far down the road. The
Right.
other point that Naomi made, I think it's going to be part of your next discussion, hopefully, is how do you see the succession planting phased as far as what's going to go in at what point? At
That
this
is
point,
for the next, that is for the
right,
next phase.
right.
Yeah.
But I just want to add to that point, when they do that, I think it would be important to bring the trees up to the proper scale. For instance, in the first phase, you're right, they're little yellow, circles now. But if the next phase is 5 years later, those circles should get bigger so we can start to judge what's going on. What I'd hate to see is everything sort of, we want this to be a gradual, very subtle process as things are brought on board. I'm assuming there's not going to be any major regrading. Is that true?
None, not in this plan.
No regrading.
Okay, so no one's flattening anything or adding. It's pretty much what we've got. And the last question, I might have missed it. We lost one of our beautiful big trees. I don't know what it is, but I should, on one side of the town hall. Are we basically just going to let that other one continue, I hope, until it goes its natural death, or is there a discussion about something happening with that?
Our new DPW director asked for a proposal to address the plantings around the town hall. And so.
Right, but I think part of that tree is still there, and even though it's asymmetrical, I mean, it's obviously sad, but I'd hate to lose them, that icon. So I think we want to make sure that's part of the discussion.
Not part of this discussion, but
Okay, all right,
because the town hall landscaping is not part of the town green.
Okay, I was just concerned because part of what had been said was you want to see the entire colonnade. And honestly, I don't think you need to see the entire colonnade. I think you can blur the edges. This is where the formality, I think, would get too strong if you saw the whole facade at once. I think to soften the edges is a good thing. So unfortunately, I have other things. I got to say goodbye. Thank you very much, Carol. Wonderful. Thank you so very much.
Well, thanks
Thank
for
you.
attending. Yeah, I think we
Yep.
can call it quits for everybody. It's been an hour and a half, and thank you very much for everybody who came. And if you have more comments, send them to us at tag@westonma.gov. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Naomi. We'll be in touch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Yep.